Let's just say that when it came to curfew attendance in my hometown, I wasn't exactly getting any awards in my youth. I'd been picked up a few times, but all it took was a promise that I'd finally learned my lesson and punishment from my parents for the police to let me off with just a warning. The curfew was that no one under 18 was allowed to be outside after dark unattended between the hours of 10 p.m. and 6 a.m. Kind of a stupid rule if you ask me, because all the best movies had midnight showings at our local theater that almost none of us could go to. We still went anyway, of course, but it didn't come without risks if we walked there. Most days, my mom could pick me up and drop me off, but she often worked on the weekends, so if I wanted to see a late-night showing, I'd have to brave the walk myself and duck out of sight of any passing marked police cruisers. So let me set the scene. It was 2018 and a horror movie called Hereditary had just come out. Everyone I'd known who'd seen it was raving about it, and that immediately piqued my interest. My girlfriend at the time loved horror movies and being creeped out as much as I did. We made plans to meet up that Saturday night for a technically illegal midnight showing. We were both 16 at the time. The movie theater is squished between the courthouse and a tattoo shop on Main Street. Right across from it is this barren parking lot, illuminated only by the sparse lights peppering the side of the road. Although it's usually bustling during the day, Main Street is absolutely a dead zone for traffic at night. Only a few insomniacs, night shifters, and delinquents like us remain to be seen. My girlfriend Sarah thought that if we cut through the parking lot to get there, we could duck in an alleyway between the tattoo shop and the movie theater if a cop car happened to pass by. Then, on the way home, we could go in between cars to keep from being seen. I thought that was a genius plan, and ultimately that's what we decided to go with. I told my mom I was going to spend the night playing video games with a friend, and she told her father she'd been invited to a slumber party that same night. I can't objectively say how believable we were, but they both decided to let us go anyways. The plan was on. As the sun set on D-Day, I was jittery with excitement, both with the thrill of seeing the movie and of spending time with my girlfriend, as well as the idea that we could pull this off. The first couple times I snuck out, I was a bit careless and got up to some minorly illegal shit, so I was determined not to make any mistakes this time, both for my sake and my mom's. I didn't want to give her a heart attack of having to face a fine because her son got in trouble too many times after all. My mom went to work around 8 p.m. and wouldn't be back until early in the morning. Around 5 or so, Sarah texted me that her dad had already passed out for the evening in front of a football game, so we had some time to kill and prepare for the night. That included grabbing some snacks. I spent a few hours goofing around online until about 10:30. By then, it was time to head out. The night was crisp and chilly. I pulled my hoodie up around my face, already feeling the bite from the wind. The leaves crunched under my feet as I walked through the cul-de-sac where I lived. All my neighbors' houses were dark, meaning that no one was there to see me skulking past them. Not that anyone on my street would have cared about a random teenage boy. But you can never be too careful. Sarah and I were supposed to meet at the Circle K near Main Street, grab some snacks to stuff into her bag for the movie, and hightail it to the theater without being seen by a curfew officer. Seemed simple enough, so we got right to it. We joked and laughed as we made our way to the convenience store, saying how the walk back home would be extra creepy. Sometimes we intentionally like to creep ourselves out after seeing a horror movie. It really heightened the experience, you know? After stuffing my pockets and her backpack with Sour Patch Kids, Junior Mints, gummy worms, and soda cans, Sarah and I made our way to the theater. We were expecting at least one cop car to pass us by. The area we were going to was pretty heavily patrolled, but there was no sign of them. In fact, we didn't pass a single car or person once we crossed the dimly lit parking lot and came face to face with Main Street. Sarah and I looked at each other. Sure, a small town has its ghost town days, but there weren't even any people lining up for a movie, and a pretty popular one at that. There didn't even seem to be people coming or going home from work either. I got a little prickle in my stomach right then. Something that said, you should probably go home. Something is wrong here. One look at Sarah told me she was suddenly feeling nervous about the whole thing too, but I brushed the twist in my gut aside in favor of trying to play it cool and look brave. Just because the theater was dead didn't mean anything was wrong, right? It was just an unusually quiet night. The ticket person let us in without any issue, though he did make a note about how 2 kids like us shouldn't be out on a night like tonight. Sarah asked him why, and the guy shrugged and said that he didn't know exactly what was happening, but he saw a ton of police cars going down the street earlier, all with lights flashing and sirens blaring. Seemed like something pretty serious was going down. Thankfully, that was in the opposite direction of where we'd be heading at the end of the movie. We told him we'd be fine. The movie itself was fantastic. I felt a genuine shiver run through me as the film reached its conclusion. Sarah squeezed my hand the entire time and gave me a look as the credits rolled. To be honest though, with what the guy said about all the police cars, that made me reconsider finding a spot to make out on the way home. She agreed, and once we tossed and ate our remaining popcorn, we made our way down Main Street. We scanned for any sign of returning cops, but there was still nobody around. We figured they were probably still dealing with the emergency on the other side of town. Sarah and I were able to relax a little. Not enough to linger anywhere, but enough to slow down and talk about the movie a bit. Sarah was just saying something when she suddenly paused. I asked her what was up, and she shushed me and pointed to a Tractor Supply store a little ways down the street. "Hey, look behind the tractors, right there!" At first, I had no idea what she was seeing. Then, as my eyes squinted and focused, I could see a police car parked sideways behind the row of red, blue, and green tractors. The marker was clearly visible, but its lights were all dark. Its windows were also tinted, so I couldn't tell if someone was in it or not. It sat motionless in the parking lot, hiding, as if waiting for someone to pass by and cause trouble. Sarah said we should cross the street and hide before the officer inside noticed us. That sounded like a good plan to me. Before we could, though, the police car flared to life. It raced out of the Tractor Supply with enough speed to skid across the pavement. They even did a U-turn and turned to face us. The headlights were turned off, and we could just see the outline of a guy sitting in the driver's seat. This was not normal. We were freaked out by the whole situation. The police car slowly made its way towards us. We expected it to pull over and stop, or for the officer to roll down his window and ask what we were doing out so late. But instead, the car picked up speed and sped off into the night, lights still dark. We breathed a sigh of relief. We weren't sure what we'd seen exactly, but given the night we'd had, we wanted to head back home straight away. The next day, Sarah texted me a link to a news article that had released that morning before we woke up. It turns out that when the police cars had their drive by the movie theater, they'd been responding to an armed robbery in progress at the local jewelry store. During a standoff, the robber had somehow overtaken an officer and stolen his police car, leading to a manhunt that spanned the entire town. They still hadn't caught the guy yet. They didn't even know who it was at the time, so good luck with that. Sarah was absolutely certain the car we saw at the Tractor Supply was the stolen one, and that the guy behind the wheel had just committed the armed robbery. It makes sense, but it also creeps me the hell out. Anything could have happened when he cornered us on that deserted street. I'm just glad nothing did. I'd never been out on a canoe before, mostly because of some turbulent family history with being on the water. So, when a friend of mine offered to take me out one day, I was curious enough to say yes. That friend went by the name Adam. He was a little older than the rest of us, articulate with poetry and quite handsome, so a few of the girls in our group had a crush on him, me included. The 5 of us planned to go on a camping trip by a large lake in our area that spring. We were all really excited. It's an odd time to go camping for some, but it was spring vacation and we wanted to make the most of it before going back to school. The guy who owned the spot said it was a completely new one. No one had ever camped there before. We had to clear the spot of debris, as well as make our own fire pit. We were all outdoorsy people though, so that wasn't really an issue for us. Actually, it was pretty fun clearing the leaves and seeing what we could find. I even found a snake under a pile of leaves. The tiny guy was scared and trying to bite us, so Adam picked him up and put him down a bit further away from our sight so he wouldn't accidentally get hurt. Being a big fan of reptiles myself, I found myself being even more drawn to Adam because of that. I wanted to get to know him a little more on this trip. After we all settled around the fire and had our fill of hot dogs and cheeseburgers and whatever, Adam came up to me and asked if I'd ever been canoeing before. I said no. He said he'd brought one out to use on the lake while we were here and asked if I wanted my first lesson. Of course, I told him yes. I was going to do it, spend some alone time with Adam, and maybe, if I was lucky, see if he felt anything for me. I knew it was a long shot, but you can't blame me for trying, right? We decided to set out on the water in the later afternoon. Sunset, us all alone in the middle of the lake on the golden water, it would be perfect for a date. He loaded the boat and had me get in at the front. He pushed off with ease and powered us out, while I fumbled with the oars myself. We laughed about my splashing and started talking about anything and everything. My heart was beating a mile a minute the entire time, and not just from all the exercise. Adam looked really cute. He was smiling at me more than I'd ever seen him before. I thought that there was no way something could come along and distract us now. Not the fire going out, not a tent coming loose, especially not one of our other friends. But I was wrong. Suddenly, Adam seemed to be looking somewhere behind me. I thought he was going to point out a cool-looking bird or some other animal, but the expression on his face told me it was not anything good. He looked pale, and there was a hint of fear in his eyes. I started to ask him what was going on, but he put a finger to his lips and made a gesture to be quiet. "Try to stay low," he said. "There's someone watching us." He pulled me down below the lip of the canoe, as low as we could possibly crouch down. My back was crushed against his chest. Normally, this would have sent my heart pounding, but under the circumstances, all I could feel was an ice-cold shiver creeping up my neck. Together, we peeked back up over the top of the canoe, and I heard Adam swear. "Oh, fuck!" There was another boat out on the water a little ways away from us. In the dark, I thought it was a guy setting up his fishing rod, but when I focused a bit more and my eyes adjusted, I realized with shock that it was a rifle, that he was pointing right at us. I almost yelled out loud, but Adam quickly put a hand over my mouth. "Don't move," he kept repeating under his breath. I don't know if it was more for me or for himself, maybe both. The man stayed motionless for what seemed like minutes, just looking at us down his rifle. He didn't say a word, not one damn thing, as he toyed with us like it was a sick game. I couldn't make out any of the guy's features, but I could tell he was tall. I could also make out the hints of a wild expression on his face. The only time he moved was to slowly pan the barrel of his gun back and forth between me and Adam, as if he was trying to decide who to get rid of first. We needed to find a way out of here, now. I grabbed an oar and frantically started splashing, trying to turn this thing around and keep us moving. If we were moving, the guy wouldn't have a clear target. Stupid, I know, but it was a hell of a lot better than just being sitting ducks out on the lake. Adam followed suit, and we had just managed to turn around when the first shot fired. The man missed. The bullet made a splash as it hit the water only a bit away from our boat. The shot made my ears ring. I heard Adam shouting, "What the hell are you doing?" We paddled. More shots rang out, but they seemed to be splashing on either side of us instead of finding a direct target in us. They then seemed to stop, though we didn't look back until we almost ran aground, out of range of the rifle seemingly. Adam didn't even bother dragging the boat on land. He jumped out and told me to follow, and I wasn't going to question him. We dove behind the trees trying to catch our breath. We could hear our friends laughing and setting up another fire in the distance. I wanted to scream at them to duck and be quiet, that there was a guy with a gun out on the water that might be heading towards us, but no words would come out. My mouth moved, but my breath just wheezed out of my chest. Was I a coward? There was fight, flight, and freeze, and out of the options my body had chosen for me, Adam was the one to warn everyone. He squeezed my hand and forced me out of the freeze, dragging me along with him back to camp. Our friends, of course, didn't believe us when we told them what happened. At least, not at first. They thought we were playing some kind of joke on them. But honestly, what kind of friend would play a sick prank like that? We told them, look out on the lake and you'll see him. Sure enough, the small boat was still bobbing out on the water. The man was facing away from all of us, but you could see the shine of his rifle when he lit up a flashlight. Our friends didn't say anything after that. We snuffed out the fire and piled into a tent together, sat around and tried to overcome the shock and figure out what to do. We could call the police or the owner, but it wasn't guaranteed the person wouldn't find us before they got here. He could also just disappear with no evidence too. We'd be screwed if everyone thought it was a prank call. We could try and get back to the car ourselves, but there was no easy way to hightail it out of there a second time without risking getting hit. To put it another way, we were screwed no matter how we sliced it. The 5 of us sat in the dark, listening to the crickets and trying not to hyperventilate. Adam held my hand the entire time. He later apologized for even taking me out that day, but I knew the situation wasn't anyone's fault. Not anyone except that random gunman. Eventually, we took a chance and called 911. The police arrived with the owner in tow 15 minutes later, sirens blaring and lights on full display. They thankfully took the call quite seriously, and we all breathed a sigh of relief when an officer identified themselves outside our tent. They searched the area, but didn't find any traces of the man, not even any spent casings. He probably had the foresight to take them with him when he was done with his fun. The owner said he'd never permitted anyone but us to be on his property and apologized profusely. He wanted to press charges for trespassing, but that would be difficult since we didn't even have a clear description of this person. We left the campsite before we even got a full day into our trip. We never went back either. One silver lining that came from the experience was that Adam and I did spend a lot more time together and even dated for a little while afterward. Though we didn't work out in the end because of unrelated reasons, we're still great friends to this day, and I'll always be grateful to him, both for breaking my apprehension about a pastime I now love and for saving my life that day. We still don't know why that man decided to target us that day, but I guess I'd rather not know after all these years. I just hope he doesn't do it to anyone else. This is something that happened back when I was a kid. I think I was 7 years old back then. My parents had a membership to Costco. Both my mom and dad would go there all the time. In fact, it was probably the main store we would get most of our groceries and stuff. One time, I went there with just my dad. I don't remember exactly why my mom or any of my siblings didn't go with us, but I do remember it was just us two. After we got inside, we got drinks from the cafeteria that Costco has, where you could buy food and things like that. We shopped for all the things we had to get that day. I'm not sure exactly how long, but it probably took about 30 minutes or so. I remember going up and down just about every aisle. It seemed my dad would take even longer than my mom to shop, because he wasn't as organized. He had a list, but he never seemed to know where anything was, and would go up and down the same aisles over and over. After we were finally done shopping, we checked out. My dad said he had to use the bathroom real quick before we left and asked me if I had to go too. I did, but I didn't want to use the restroom at Costco. I felt I could wait until we got home, so I said no. I waited right by the shopping cart outside the bathroom. My dad went in, and less than 30 seconds after, I saw this weird guy coming up towards me. I remember that I thought he must have worked there for some reason. The guy was sort of big and had glasses on. He asked me if I was waiting for my dad, and I said yes. He then told me that I was not allowed to wait there, and that it was a new rule. This sounds so stupid years later, but at the time I actually believed him. He said that he would show me where I could wait instead. I grabbed the cart and started to follow him. He told me I could just leave the cart there though. The guy went right around the corner, only about 10 feet away, and opened these doors that led to some kind of hallway. I didn't even know that was there. We both went inside, and the guy kept walking down to this door, which seemed to lead to the parking lot outside. By now, I was obviously very confused. It looked like we were going to leave. I stopped right where I was, knowing that something was seriously wrong with this situation. The guy stopped as well and turned back to me. He told me to keep following him, but I was not that stupid. I started to turn around and go back. The guy ran up to me and grabbed my arm. Right then, the doors that we had come through opened back up, and I saw my dad there. The guy who had me turned around, letting me go. He then ran to the door to the parking lot and left immediately. My dad ran in and grabbed me and asked me what was going on. I told him everything that happened. The police ended up being called to the Costco. I didn't realize just how serious of a situation that was at the time, but I do now years later. I still feel lucky that I got away from that guy. I mean, my dad wasn't even in the bathroom for a single minute, and I was right outside of it. After that day, I don't think I ever went back to Costco. I had a Costco membership last year just for a couple of months. It seemed like a good deal, and at first I liked it a lot. I would shop there at least one time per week, but usually more. One day I went there to get some groceries and everyday items. I had a lot of shopping to do that day, and Costco was not the only store I had to go to. There was one other store I would be going to afterwards. I spent a while shopping inside Costco, and when I was done, I was starting to get really hungry. I stopped by the cafe they had at the front of the store. There was an area to buy food and drinks, as well as some tables set up around it. I grabbed some pizza and churros and went out to one of the tables to eat. I didn't want to eat in my car. I was at a table on the side, kind of tucked away into the corner of the cafeteria area. I was minding my own business, just eating my meal, when I looked up to see this guy staring right at me. He was sitting in front of me, and there were two open tables in between us. The guy was staring at me so intensely that it instantly creeped me out. He had these wild bug eyes. I had to look down right away. When I looked up again, he was still staring. Was this guy joking around? It really didn't seem like it to me. I didn't know this guy either. I didn't recognize him and couldn't think of why he'd be staring at me like this. I didn't bother to try to talk to him or anything. It was way too weird. I decided to just go out to my car and leave. I got up from the table and walked away. When I did, luckily the man remained seated at his table, watching me all the while. I went out to the parking lot and found my car. I went inside and quickly finished eating my items. I then headed to my final stop of the day, one last store. This store was just 5 minutes away, and it was pretty busy when I got there, just like Costco had been. I drove around to find an open parking space towards the back and parked my car. I then went inside and did my shopping. Didn't really take as long in there, maybe only about 15 minutes or so. I came back out and started heading to my car. Right as I got inside, I happened to glance across the parking lot and saw the exact same guy from before. He was sitting inside of a car in the driver's seat, staring at me in the same way he had been earlier. This creeped me out even more so than before. I immediately backed out and started driving away to leave. The problem was, I had to drive right by his car to get to the exit of the parking lot. As I drove past him, his car pulled out and began driving behind me right away. My heart sank when I saw this. Now I was leaving the parking lot with this creep following me. I turned right, and he did the same. I drove down the road a little ways and turned again. He remained right on my tail. I didn't even care about going home anymore at this point. I just started randomly driving and turning at almost every opportunity. Soon, even I didn't really know where I was anymore. I was just turning down all these random quiet roads. I found myself inside a residential area with the guy still following me. It became quite clear to me that this guy would follow me wherever I went. I wasn't exactly sure what to do, but that's when I finally got the idea to just drive down to the police station. I put the closest one in on my phone and then followed the directions to get there. It took maybe 10 minutes, with the guy following me still the entire time. When I got there, I pulled into the parking lot. The guy didn't. He just kept driving down the road. It worked just as I hoped it would. I waited there for a little while before actually going home. I was afraid the guy would still be waiting around to find me around some corner or something, and then keep following me. Luckily, it seems he got impatient and gave up. I was able to make it home safely and did not see the man again. I used to work at Costco. My job was mainly as a cashier up at the checkout lanes. I'd had this job for 6 months or so, and it was pretty okay. Something really scary happened once though, so I thought I would share my experience. It all started on a Friday night. I was working a shift where I got off at 8 p.m. I'm not sure when I started, but I do remember it was not that long of a shift. Things went by pretty easily, and by the time the shift was over, it was really dark outside. When I got off after clocking out, I left the store to return to my car. I had parked at the very back end of the parking lot, kind of in the middle area. Behind our parking lot, there were some more businesses and other stores and restaurants, but they were separated by this row of trees. I was excited to go home after a long day of work. When I got within 20 feet of my car and took out my keys, I was about to push the unlock button on my key fob when I saw something. Somebody was inside my car. I stopped in my tracks and looked a bit closer. It appeared as though there was a man sitting in the back seat of my vehicle. He was looking in the other direction and not towards me. I checked to make sure this was in fact my car. I knew that it was, but why would somebody be inside of it? I didn't go any further. I turned around and walked back to the Costco entrance. My mind was racing. I was trying to figure out how and why somebody was inside my vehicle. I was also wondering what the hell I should do about it now. I found a coworker inside of the store who I was friendly with and told her about what had happened. She offered to come outside with me and look to see if the person was still there. We both walked out and slowly approached my car. We stopped at about 50 feet away and looked inside. It looked like the man was gone now. We walked closer to the car and very carefully made it within 10 feet or so. That's when we could see the guy was still in there, but was now ducking down in the back seat. Luckily, he didn't seem to have noticed us. We walked back a ways, and my coworker told me to hit the unlock button to my car to see if the man would leave. I did so, and we waited, kind of hiding behind another vehicle in the lot. The guy did not leave mine, though. We could no longer see him because he was ducked down still, but we would be able to tell if he left. He continued to stay inside. After waiting for a few minutes, we both decided to head back into the Costco. We were thinking about calling the police after talking for several minutes inside. After talking to another coworker about it, I decided I would walk back outside to call the police and stand near the entrance doors of the Costco, just in case the man tried to make an escape. I began dialing the number. It was at this point I saw the man actually get out of my vehicle. He left out the rear passenger side door, which was the furthest away from me. I then saw him slip away behind the trees, leading to some of the other businesses nearby. I carefully walked back to my car. I kept my eyes on that tree line the entire time. The guy was now out of my sight, and who knows where he was hiding. If he came back, I wanted to be able to see him. I was able to get inside my car and lock the doors, then finally drove back to my house. When I got home, I looked throughout my entire car. Everything seemed to be the same. I never really kept anything of value inside of it. In fact, I didn't really have anything in it at all. Nothing had been stolen, and nothing was damaged either. I don't know what that guy was doing in there, but it really gives me the creeps. Did he know it was specifically my car? Or was this just a random thing, and I was unfortunate enough to be the victim? I don't know. I figure I must have forgotten to lock my car doors, though usually I always remember to lock them. I guess it must have slipped my mind this time. I don't know how else to explain him being able to get inside my car. I'm just glad he left on his own. He must have realized I'd known he was there when I unlocked the vehicle but never got inside. I'm a former Costco member. If you don't know what Costco is, you pay a monthly fee in order to shop at the store. The prices are a little bit cheaper, and you can buy many things in bulk, which is why there's a membership. The store is massive, and they also have a gas station at most locations. This is generally situated at the back of the parking lot, and you can get cheaper gas if you're a member. When I was a member there, the store would always be super busy when I shopped, and people would seemingly be everywhere. The area was pretty populated, so it did make sense, but it still surprised me every time. Even more busy than the store, though, was the gas station. I know everybody goes crazy over gas prices, so I think all the members like to get gas at Costco. I would always get my gas there when I was a member too, because I would save a lot of money. Plus, I only lived about 10 minutes away from the store. One time, I had to go grocery shopping and get gas as well. I was almost out. When I pulled into the parking lot, I saw a long line of cars for the gas station. This was not at all uncommon, but I had never seen it quite as long as it was on this particular day. There were 4 gas pumps, so 8 areas total for cars that could be fueling at once. Costco had a few employees out there to work near the gas station and had 2 people there to literally help control the line. It would have been chaos without them, but even with them, it was pretty bad. There were 2 main lines of cars, and probably 5 to 10 of them in each line. That's how backed up the thing was. I considered waiting until later in the day to get some gas, but ultimately decided to just get in the back of the line. I went into the left line and committed to it. Things actually started to move faster than I expected. I moved up a couple of spaces, but was still last in line. Soon, some other people joined in behind me, and in the next line over as well. Luckily for me, the line I was in was moving faster for some reason. I guess I was just pretty lucky that day. When there was just one car in front of me waiting to get gas, somebody left. The car in front of me moved up. I was about to drive forward as well. Then I would be on the deck. But as I started driving, one of the cars from the other line on the right tried to pull in front of me. I couldn't believe it. This guy was supposed to stay in his line. Nobody was just switching lines. I didn't let him in, of course, and quickly pulled forward. He had to stop on a dime. He was diagonal between the line that he had been in and my line. He started to honk at me. but I didn't care. After that though, I saw his door open up. He actually got out and started yelling at me. He was a bigger guy, but not that tall. He had a dark mustache and his head was shaved. I rolled down my window a little and yelled back to stay in his own line. The guy started cursing and yelling at me, saying how I wasn't moving up fast enough and he was in a hurry. He started saying that some of us have places to be. The guy was causing a whole scene. Somebody else rolled down their window as well and told him to get back in his car. Within minutes, one of the employees that was working over there came over and tried to calm the guy down. He finally got back inside of his vehicle. Then it was my turn to get gas. I did so quickly and left the gas station. I headed to the Costco parking lot and parked my car. I then went inside. While I was inside, I got my cart and started shopping for the things I was getting. Not a whole lot, just a few food items. I pushed my cart down one aisle and grabbed some things. As I was pushing further toward the back of the store, I heard another person start walking behind me. I didn't really think anything of it. The person was walking really fast though, and passed me on the right side. When they passed by me, I saw it was the same guy who'd yelled at me before. After passing me by, he went right in front of my cart and stopped abruptly. I had to stop quickly, and my cart hit this guy in his back a little. He then turned around and asked me what my problem was. I'd had enough of this guy. I told him to leave me alone, and I was tired of all his nonsense. I probably didn't quite say it that politely though. The guy cursed at me one more time, then walked away. I watched him go back towards the front of the store. I was really glad to see him gone. Our interaction inside the store lasted for no more than a minute. I was able to continue my shopping without any more problems. I looked around almost constantly to make sure that I wouldn't go near that guy, just in case he was still somewhere inside. I just wanted to avoid him. He seemed to be nothing but trouble. Luckily, I didn't see him for the rest of the time I was shopping in there. I checked out and then left the store. I walked back to my car in the parking lot, only to see it was now all scratched up. The guy had keyed my car. My car is black, and both sides had about 4 or 5 long scratch marks on them. I was so angry, and I knew exactly who had done it. I called the police right there and waited for them to arrive. Then I told them the whole story. I didn't know the man's name or license plate, but I did know his car model. Plus, I figured he must be a Costco member. They ended up locating him quite easily, and he was forced to pay for my car to be repaired. He was also banned from Costco. After that experience, I hope I never see him again. I no longer have a Costco membership. That's not the reason why I stopped, though. I just prefer to go to other stores now. I will never forget that experience. I grew up in the 1990s, born in the late 80s. I remember getting my first bike and starting to explore the area I grew up in, upstate New York. Where I grew up is much different now than it was in the 90s. It was much more rural, with clusters of neighborhoods here and there. I lived near an old landfill, and the main road connected a lot of semis down to some factories in a neighboring town. That was a 5-minute bike ride. We also had an old Baptist church that was founded by an eccentric former hippie who was really good to the community. My dad was a very serious drinker and loved to fish and hunt, etc. He loved to go with his friend because it gave him an excuse to drink and kill something. He ended up making this deal with this pastor and the gentleman who owned a pond behind the church to stock it up with fish. At the time, my dad and his friends started becoming serious competitive fishers. They would go out on a boat, which my dad eventually had to sell his share to keep drinking. My friends and I had permission to fish there in the summer as well, and we would swim in there too and all that. I lived easily less than 5 minutes from this pond. My friends and I went out there one summer day. It was around 1995, I believe. My mom had heard on the news a week prior about this wave of kidnappings. I don't remember if Amber Alerts were a thing back then yet, so she decided to make a code word with me. She came to me and told me that if anyone ever tried to convince me they knew my mom or dad, in the hopes to get me into their car, to ask them for the code word. Ours was pickles. Fast forward to our fishing trips. My friends left before me. After that, we sat around and swam more than anything. My friend Dennis got mad because he was serious about fishing, so he and his brother left. I was now all alone. On the road, once you got past this area, it was a straight shot to the main part of town. I got down to my area and was about to turn in. I didn't realize I was being followed by a pickup with this Cletus-looking guy from The Simpsons in it. He greeted me and told me that my mom and dad were waiting for me at this local restaurant which I knew. He told me they'd asked him to come and get me and meet them there so we could all have dinner. I immediately thought about what my mom had said and started getting this evil feeling like I was in danger. I told him that my parents specifically had a password that they gave to their friends, and that if he was really their friend, he was required to tell me. At that point, he got mad and started swearing at me. I didn't see one, but I was certain he had a gun on him as he started fumbling around in his truck. I turned around and started pedaling back down my road, screaming for help and that I was in danger. He jerked his truck to follow, but I was making too much noise and was already right next to my house. He decided it was a lost cause and took off. When I got there, my mom was home and I was hysterical. I asked her why she would ask such a mean friend to come pick me up. I told her what happened, and she didn't believe me. She calmed me down and told me I did the right thing, but I could tell she had a hard time believing what I was saying. She'd also grown up in the same town, and nothing like that had ever happened to her. A few days later, a friend of hers told her a similar story about her son in another part of town. The police then became involved. The cops came and talked to me, and I gave them the same description of the man, truck, and everything that happened. I don't know if the guy was ever caught. I used to be very bitter at my mom for not believing me, but now I understand the confusion she had. Instead of reacting right away, she tried to console me and keep an eye on everything. My dad, on the other hand, was more vigilant about it and would ask me all the time when he'd take me out if someone looked like that guy or if a truck looked like the same one I'd seen. I hope no other kids were harmed by him.